Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode from the AHA Live at AHA at Play Arcade. We're in the living room. So today we have a returning guest. We have Max Wikermayer. Could you spell your last name, please?
Sure. Wickemeyer. Not a wicker basket. It's Wikermayer.
Wicke, not Wicca.
Thank you.
And we also have Karen Chace, whom I've known. I can't remember.
Oh, we go way back to your UMass days.
UMass, yeah, exactly. Karen, it's Chace with a
C-H-A-C-E.
Okay. And also your professional name is Storybug.
Well, I'm a professional storyteller, teaching artist, and my moniker is Storybug. There's a long story behind that I'll tell you one day.
There would have to be. Right. Karen came into my marketing classes a couple of times when I was teaching at UMass to teach the importance of story, especially in advertising.
I did.
People don't buy things, they buy stories.
That's right. That was so much fun. I remember that really fondly. Thank you for inviting me. It was
You're
great
welcome.
fun.
Yeah. You still call them kids, when you're teaching. They're always kids, even though they were like, adults and such. They really appreciated it, and they got a lot out of it. The theme for this AHA is I Am New Bedford, the Storytelling Series, which I'm assuming means they're planning on doing more than one of these. So it's perfect because the Artist Index, all of the podcasters, and we're waiting for funding to get Max on board to do his own podcast. We do have a lady coming on finally. Hope she shows up tonight, Claudia. It's just so we can have more. There doesn't need to be a law for DEI, but
Balance.
There has to be
Balance.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
Very well
sense.
said.
Yeah, but I'm going to try to
The
stay
last
away
time
from that.
it'll be
I'm going to
appropriate.
stay away from those dark alleys, But we're documentarians, and as such, we are storytellers, or we prompt our guests to tell their stories. And tell us about, if you can, specifically about any artists that you've known growing up in this area or that have affected you. And what I mean by artists is visual, performing, literary, or even culinary.
Oh, in this area specifically?
Yeah.
Well, that's a tough one. Honestly, I can't think of any, professional artists off the top of my head. But, what I do think of is some of the teachers that affected me during my high school years. I had a really wonderful English teacher and a history teacher.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Bishop Stang.
Okay.
And they were way ahead of their time because what they did, it was my sophomore year, and the English genres that she was teaching, the history teacher taught the same moments in history at the same time. So both classes ran parallel. And it was really an amazing way to teach because you could see what was happening in the world at the time, both in history, politics, and in literature, and how the writers were responding to it. So I would have to say, I loved to read, and back then, and still do. And actually, at the time, I wanted to be a history teacher. The history teacher I had was so amazing.
What was their name?
Her name was Miss Wampler. And she was one of the non-religious teachers at the school, because at the time there were a lot of nuns and priests that were teaching. And the English teacher, she was a nun, And her name has just popped right out of my mind right now. But I would say, it's so important to have those people in education that really inspire you, whether or not you choose to take that particular subject and make it part of your life. It's a way of inspiring you to stay engaged and to listen to stories, whether it be historical stories or personal stories, and continue to add to your knowledge by reading. So,
no, I mean, and teaching is an art. I'll never forget when I was at the University of Miami. I was supposed to be a teaching assistant, but unfortunately, the teacher I was going to assist with, he was a glassblower, and his figure drawing class, he was in Florence as I never met him. I got to meet him. He was every summer he'd go to Florence and do his glass blowing there. And then I got a call from the department chair to go downstairs and to his office and talk to him. And he said, Jim's not coming back. I said, what do you mean he's not coming back? He was just diagnosed with cancer. And so he's going to be going through all the therapies there in Italy. So that means now you're the instructor of record. And are you insane? I've never taught a class in my life. So then I remembered, okay, well, I got to give credit to my ex-wife. She said, just teach the way you were taught.
Ooh. Great
So I was
insight,
like,
yeah.
yeah, okay. So I went in there. I tell you, you ever have those moments where, and just to put it in that category, better than sex, and I came out of there so lit up. It was like, oh my God. And then the only and it's not really like a positive thing, but in Aladdin, when especially when Robin Williams does that incredible power,
Yes.
I mean, it was like, oh my God, I can actually pass on what I learned. And then in one of the Indian religions where you've got the turtle and then you have all the other animals standing on top. In that moment, that's what I realized, that I'm standing on my teacher's shoulders, who are standing on their teacher's shoulders, who are standing on their teacher's shoulders. What decade or years when did you graduate from high school? If you don't
I
mind
graduated in 1973.
Okay, I graduated in 71. And all the books that we read are all banned.
Yes, exactly.
I never realized how impactful my teachers were. They were all young. You don't see them as young when you're in high school. But they were all younger instructors, and I guess to hang that label on them, they were liberal or human, the humanistic, and it's just absolutely amazing what I learned from them, and that was a big inspiration. So, what is it? When did it's a bad pun, but when did the story bug bite you?
Oh my goodness. I was working at a school, and I was working in the accounting capacity, and I was also preschool teaching at the same time, and I was on the PTO board. My son was in the elementary school at the time. And the principal asked me to be a parent liaison at a conference for talented and gifted children in New Hampshire. And it was a weekend conference, and so I went. And one day at lunch, they had a storyteller, a professional storyteller, as our entertainment. And she told a variety of folk tales interwoven with personal stories. And it was fascinating. And I remember just thinking, oh my goodness, you can do this for a living. I had never seen a storyteller before. And so I found out her information. I reached out to her. And then when I came home, this was pre-Google days. So it was kind of hard to research and find out anything. But I ended up finding out that there was a storytelling conference in Iowa coming up. And so I bought a plane ticket, and I put myself on a plane, and I went to the conference, and that's how it started. And that was back in 1999, 2000. And from then on, I just started taking more workshops. And one that you'll probably know, I think we talked about this before, talking about someone who inspired me, but later on was Maggie Pierce, who ran TriWorks for years.
Yep.
And in my world, storytelling world, she's internationally known and revered and loved. And she was giving a series of workshops in New Bedford through South Coast Collaborative way back when.
Oh, the South Coast Learning Network?
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And
Funny, I couldn't remember that the other day. I was trying to tell somebody about an experience with them, yeah?
yeah, and I took 5, it was 5 evenings with her, and she was just extremely supportive. After I took the workshop, whenever she saw something in the newspaper about me, she'd cut it out, clip it, and mail it to me. Before there was email, she'd send it to me, and we had a lovely lunch one day, and she was very, very supportive. So locally, when I got into storytelling, she was someone who was instrumental in giving me a push to continue.
No, storytelling.
I want to say that I'm sort of fascinated by some of the steps. Number one, it was the principle.
Yes.
And that sort of lit, an idea for you to go to that conference. And then you arrive there and you sort of find something else, right?
That's right.
It's the storytelling. So it's sort of those events that
is a story in itself.
Yeah, and it's significant events that you took advantage of too. And not only there was several things that you went after. You went after the conference that the principal talked about, and then you had the courage to get to the ticket and go to Iowa. and so I just think I thank you. It's just part of the story you've shared with me.
We
I
had
appreciate that.
this
Thank
conversation catching up on the phone too. I mean, about 2 African proverbs.
Yes.
And one of the drivers for us here at the Artist Index is that is that horrible reality that you die twice. It's I believe it's a Nigerian proverb. You die when you have taken your last breath, and you die again when the last person who speaks your name draws their last breath.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is so profound and scary beyond belief. I used to teach art history as well. I've got a kind of a bizarre, background, teaching art history and then teaching marketing, the only MFA to teach at the College of Business. But anyway, the pyramids, and I said, they went to all this labor. It wasn't about their riches. It wasn't about their power. It wasn't about the preservation of their body. It was about the preservation of memory. Mm-hmm. And all those things that you see on the wall are stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And everybody has a story. Now, depending on your cultural background, some cultures, some people assume that some cultures have a greater storytelling component than others do. I know the Irish, there's a story for everything. My mother was a storyteller, but of personal stories. If it wasn't for her telling me stories about my grandfather, I know it sounds weird to say, but I would have never have met him. Mm-hmm. And that is a really important thing, because those stories, as I go over them in my head, our stories, like onions, there are layers to them where you've heard the story umpteen times, and then you're minding your own business, walking the dog or washing the dishes, and all of a sudden one of the layers peels off, and you go, oh my gosh, how could I have not possibly fathomed this or thought about this? Because you were thinking of just the words or the surface of it, but never getting down into it.
The depth of it. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. The story that we're trying to tell of all the artists is simply this. And people who listen to this podcast, and my podcast in particular, will know that I'm kind of obsessed to preserve and resurrect the memories of my instructors. Francisco Raposa, who was my high school art instructor, he was also an instructor at Swain and the Swain School of Design. He was a phenomenal watercolorist, and if it wasn't for him, I would have never applied to what was then SMU. He helped me prepare my portfolio. My mom paid for a private instructor for me to learn painting, which was beyond what I could get in high school. And his name was Mal Oliveira. He was a carpenter for Concordia Yacht.
Oh, yeah.
But he was like one of those Renaissance men. He was a scrimshander. He was a woodworker. He was phenomenal. And then going into SMU, there was Herb Cummings, who a bunch of us from the BFA class of 75 at SMU still get together on a quarterly basis, and we have great difficulty speaking about our instructors without getting a catch in our throats. Mm-hmm. That is, to me, a testament.
Oh, absolutely.
And I want to make sure, Alma Cummings, who is my only connection to Herb Cummings, and we look at each other and we can't. She wants to, but we can't. The emotion is so incredibly great. So that's what this is all about. My own mother, she was a fado singer, and I did a story on her, and Dr. Gloria Dessau contacted me and says, Ron, you know what you did? I said, yeah, I wrote a story about my mother. No, you did more than that, Ron. The story you wrote about your mother, she is the only documented fado singer of her generation because of what you did. Wow. All the other ones, they weren't considered nice ladies, nice girls. There was just this weird misogynistic attitude of the old school Portuguese men. A lot of cultures have that.
What a shame that all that history is lost.
Exactly. So, what's the difference between his story and just story?
Well, I think, story in itself, if you're talking about personal stories, hopefully if someone is sharing a personal story, because, you have like The Moth now, which is really big about personal stories. And a couple of my colleagues years ago started Mass Mouth, which is now morphed into Stories from the Stage on WGBH.
Yes.
And, personal stories, hopefully, when you're on the stage telling a personal story, you're not just telling it for yourself. You're telling it to make a wider connection so that someone can listen to that story, hear that story, and say, I connect with that. I remember something similar happening to me, or it resonates with them and helps them maybe work through something in their own mind. So personal stories have that wonderful magic to it if it's done correctly, that it's a way of connecting with the audience. It's not about you. It's about the story and it's about the connection. Now for folktales and fairy tales, which I also tell and teach, the art of oral tradition storytelling. Those old folk tales and fairy tales, they were not originally written for children. They were written for an adult audience. And if you go back and you read the original Grimm folk tales and those collected from Madame d'Aulnay in France, they're very... some of them can be quite blue, and they're
dark
and dark,
black, black and blue.
Exactly, very dark, and a lot of them have been watered down through the years, and so a lot of people think that they're all about fairy tales, or they think Disney, when they think fairy tales, but all of those stories. What I love about that is I can be researching for a particular program, a theme, a genre, and I'll read a story and I'll say, I tell that story, but it's from a different culture. And the way folktales have traveled over the generations, to me, that is such an amazing way to show how we are really all connected. What might be, with Cinderella in France, the shoes are made of fur, but the Chinese folktale, the shoes are made out of fish scales. So, but it's the same story. Mm-hmm. There's over 700 versions of Cinderella from around the world.
And it's still Cenerentola, the Italian for cinder.
Exactly.
Cinders,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's about the connections you can make between the cultures. And it helps us understand that we are all really closer than we realize. And that, to me, is what is really important, both about, folk tales, fairy tales, and personal stories. It's a way to connect so that you don't see people as the other. You see them as the same.
Carl Jung did a lot of research and investigation pertaining to collective collective unconsciousness, and the tales and the root of the stories that might be part of elemental human consciousness. And that might be one more reason why there's that collectivity of the same stories everywhere.
That's right.
Yeah, I was thinking about Jung the other day, about how my spirituality has been redefined. Religion is just in my opinion only, a bastardization of spirituality. Any spirituality that becomes organized becomes foul. And
It's social control.
Yeah, I went 8 years of Catholic school. The whole idea of the seminary was on my future, and so on and so forth. And then there's just too much that just cannot be shooed away. And then there's people now saying, the universe. They refer to the universe as and this idea of a single God. Again, just my opinion and how I've been forming things out. And I've come to my own conclusion that it is a collective. There's much more than meets the eye. There are things that can't be explained. You can't find it in any book. It's only through experience. It's only through surrender. That I know that's a word that's used quite often in Christianity, but it's a word that has like incredible. It's like a stone that you drop into the ocean, and the ringlets just keep going and going and going, because no is surrender, yes is surrender. There's more profoundness than meets the eye, and even the concept of good and evil. There is no evil. There's the absence of good. So that's the kind of thing. So the collective thing. I mean, just really quick in telling stories is my my wife and daughter wanted a dog. I had moved back from Portugal. We got married, and they wanted a dog, and I did not want a dog because I did not want the pain again, because I held on to my last dog to her dying breath, and that just, in a way, she helped me be with my stepmother to her last breath, and my father. And it was just I just didn't know if I could bear that. I mean, it's an honor to be a witness to someone's passing. But and you probably have a bunch of those stories where, with the Death Eaters. What is that story? I think it's actually probably comes from Irish culture or Celtic culture, where they eat death, or they eat something. It'll pop up when we're driving home, and it's like, oh, that's what he meant. But anyway, and so our daughter, we bumped into one of our neighbors who was a foster for Paws New England, and she was fostering a Labrador who had a litter of, I think, a dozen puppies, something crazy like that. So she needed help with the whelping. And our daughter just absolutely is gaga over dogs. She'll stop the car, she'll pull over and ask you if she can talk to your dog, and that kind of thing. So anyway, so I'm in Portugal, we're going back and forth, and they're saying, what do you think of this dog? And what do you think? And it's like, I cannot pick a no. To me, it's like, I walk into a place, and the first dog that's like, get me the hell out of here, that's the one I'm going to choose. It's not, I have no criteria. It's all emotional, And so we finally picked a dog. So she now calls up our neighbor and says, "Hey, we got a dog. We got a dog." And she's like, "Oh, that's wonderful. But we're on vacation. We're down in Virginia right now. We drove to an RV down here. What's the dog's name? Because at night, I'll start the paperwork. I've got Wi-Fi reception. The dog's name is Daisy." "What?" "The dog's name is Daisy." "What kind of dog is it?" "It's an American foxhound." "Oh, you're not going to believe this." "What?" "She's in the RV with us." Explain that to me. Explain that to me. Explain that to me.
Wow. That is strange.
It is. It is. And it was just one of those. There's a lot of backstory to how Daisy came to be with Alexandra, and her husband and John, but that and then when my mom had passed in July, I already had tickets to go to Portugal in September with my grandson. The morning of my flight in September, Daisy was acting a little off. Now she had Cushing's disease, and we were watching her. And it was just she was also getting older. She was 13, pushing 13, and long story short, we had to take her into emergency vet, Cape Cod veterinary specialists in Bourne, and the vet said something like, "Are you going somewhere?" "Yeah, I'm leaving on a flight tonight to Portugal with my grandson." She said she knew you were going somewhere. "I've been doing this a long time. I deal with the death of these animals, these souls every day. She knew you were leaving, and she wanted you to be here when she transited."
Wow.
I mean, okay. So my wife and I decided we weren't going to get another dog until we were ready, because it was hard. I mean, this was a hard death for her, for us, and it was undiagnosed terminal cancer, is what it was. So we said, okay, we'll be ready when we're ready, or if a dog finds us. 2 weeks later, Snickers is walking down the street next to our house with her foster. She had just arrived from Arkansas an hour earlier. And there was just like weird things. It's like, okay, the emotional thing where it gets, Daisy sent her or whatever. But there are just some things that we're seeing now that just don't add up to they're adding up more on the side of spirituality, the side of like, ooh, that kind of thing. So how do stories get started? I mean, there's one in particular, and I'm sure now if you share your animal stories, somebody's going to have a story about their animal, and it just continues that way. What is this need to tell the stories?
Well, I think, one of the things that I do is work with seniors and connect them with my student storytellers, where, we help the seniors write a story from their life. And I think I was telling you, they're not writing their life story, they're writing a story about their life. So they pick, usually between the ages of 5 and 40, because the hope is that what we will do with connecting them with my student storytellers, who are anywhere from 4th grade to college freshmen, that they will learn about what life used to be like, because so much is being lost. Social media is great. It connects us in different ways, but that one-to-one, just listening and watching someone speak, using, facial, expression and gestures, it all adds to the story. And so what we find that a lot of the seniors that come to learn about the program, they think that the story has to be very big and very historical and have a lot of weight to it. And that's wonderful if that's the kind of story they have. Mm-hmm. But some of the most profound stories are just slices of life, a moment in time that they may have had with a grandparent or a stranger, or a best friend that they grew up with in the neighborhood. It's so important to make those kinds of connections and bridge the generations. Whether or not it's a senior and a student, if it's just two people, making those kinds of connections, you really feel like you get to know someone a little bit more rather than just saying, oh, hi, how are you today? Oh, I'm fine. And then you kind of go on with your day. But to really take the time to listen to somebody, they say, right now with everything, that's going on around us and so much information coming at us, that we don't listen to listen, we listen to respond.
Right.
And because someone is telling us something, and for instance, you're telling me that story about your dog, and you might be telling that to somebody else, and they're thinking, oh, wait a minute, when he's done, I want to tell him about my dog. So they're half listening to what you're saying, because, and that, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because they want to share their experience. But what it's doing is you're really taking yourself out of really being fully engaged. And so when I'm teaching my students, or even the elders, and they're sharing, their story sharing at some point, we always say, please listen with delight. Make sure that, your face shows that you're listening, your body language shows that you're listening. Right now with you, I can tell you're listening just by your body language, and you're nodding your head and you're smiling, and I can tell that you're engaged. And that makes such a difference. And it really makes people, the seniors will say to us after we finish, it's a 12-week program every year that we do, I feel like I matter. Because especially elders now, they feel very invisible, and I feel seen now, because someone has taken the time to listen to them, talk to them about their story, and then the students actually perform it as a first-person narrative. So it's not the seniors performing the story, it's the students performing the story. So there's a real definite connection there, because they embody the story for the senior. And it makes a huge difference when you hear your story being told back to you.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, there was a program, I tell everybody to watch it. It's called The Impossible Project. This Belgian who decided he wanted to bring back Polaroid, because there was something about Polaroid instant photography that just intrigued the heck out of him. So he started doing all the research. A couple of weird quirks is Polaroid had lost the recipe for the emulsion.
No.
They had no idea where it was. Now, you know how important Polaroid was in this city, in Bedford.
Sure.
My dad was one of the first to buy a Polaroid land camera, and this thing was like a piece of art. Brushed stainless with a leather inset and so on. He was going to nightclubs and photographing people until he photographed the wrong guy with the right woman, or the right guy with the wrong woman.
There's a story.
Kind of thing. And he was told he would be wearing the camera, or he would be dead or something like that, and he stopped. But that's just a side note. But as this process is going on, he's trying to bring back Polaroid, it was so much more. And there was a line in there, and I've got to watch it again, or try to get a transcript of it. But somebody said something that really, really sticks in my head. Where will somebody find all the texts you sent to your wife wrapped in the ribbon in your attic? Mm-hmm. Or something to that extent? When I heard that, it was like a gut shot. It was like, because we have all this information out there, but it's ethereal. So I brought that up because of the contrast to storytelling. Storytelling, what has buffeted storytelling? What has challenged storytelling? In some ways, it's actually benefited by recording, being recorded, whether by audio or audio video, or written in books. But there's got to be something that's affecting it, and I think it's more of a social than a technical thing, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the technical helps to create the stories and put them like stories on the stage from WGBH, right. That sort of thing. But it's the connection that people get, by listening and telling. I don't think that many people realize how much personal connection we have lost because of all the social media. that we have at our fingertips. Just the other night, my husband and I were out at a restaurant and, sitting there, talking. And he said to me, turn around for a minute. And I turned and I looked, and there was a woman there with her 2 daughters. She was on her phone, and the 2 daughters were on their iPads. So here they are out at a restaurant, supposedly having dinner together, and I never saw a word or a glance pass between the 3 of them. It was sad. It was really, really sad to me. And I'm not saying that, sometimes if you're out in a restaurant, someone sends you a text or you need to look something up. That happens all the time. I mean, I've done that too. But to be sitting across the table from someone, and my husband said, I want to get up and go over and say to her, these moments are fleeting. They'll be gone before you know it. Meaning the children will be grown and gone before you know it. Right. So we make sure, when we take our grandchildren out, there's a no technology policy at the table. We'll play tic-tac-toe, we'll play hangman, we'll talk about our day, whatever it may be. So being able to share stories with someone, be it a stranger or someone in the family, is a way to let them know a little bit more about yourself. I always think, my mother was 69 when she passed away very, very suddenly. And she had these wonderful stories. She grew up in a family, Irish family, 12 children. And, 2 parents in a small bungalow in New Bedford, and I think about how many people lived in that house. And she would tell me these amazing stories of what it was like in that crazy house. And, of course, growing up, you're half listening. Mm-hmm. As I got a little bit older, I listened a little bit more. I always thought there was time to ask questions and learn more. Yeah. And then suddenly she was gone. I can't ask those questions anymore. And so I'm always trying, and I said this to you the other day, we were talking about those proverbs. The African proverb, when an elder dies, a library burns down. Exactly. And you can't ask those questions anymore. No,
there are the questions that were never asked that you didn't realize you were supposed to ask. And I mean, my mom only passed away in July, and there are certain things, I've heard these stories umpteen times, and I asked her about certain facets of the story, but there was facets I never asked about, and like, how could you not have asked? There was this supposition, there was this you thought you knew enough.
You thought you always had time.
Oh, yeah, exactly. We just have, Alyssa, you want to jump in too? Okay. And you must be Claudia. Okay. I am Claudia. Sure. Because you can always jump in, Max. So Max is going to swap out with Claudia, and Alyssa's going to jump into the empty mic, and we're just going to keep going on storytelling because we have a storyteller here in film. Alyssa Botelheo.
Wonderful.
Okay. And Claudia Nagalha. I always want to say Nagalha, but I'm sure everybody does the same thing.
My stepmom's last name is Nagalha.
It is Nagalha? Yeah.
Which is funny.
Okay. This is Karen Chace and Ray Chace. And Karen is a storyteller.
Ooh,
a professional storyteller. Okay. We'll get you guys strapped in.
Yes.
And introduce yourselves and spell your name.
And spell my name?
Yeah.
Okay. Both names?
Just the last name, yeah.
Okay.
If it was Lisa, I would ask you, because, in Rhode Island, it's like 12 ways to spell Lisa.
Oh, yeah. So my name is Claudia Nagalha, and it's Negalha. And I am a costume designer, esthetician, makeup artist. I'm just a creative in general because I, too, love, any type of art, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And?
Alyssa Botelheo, ALYSSA BOTELHO.
Yeah, because Alyssa can there's a couple of different spellings of that too, right?
Yes.
It's probably second only to Lisa.
Yeah.
Which has Alyssa in, right?
Yeah. And then Botelheo, the amount of times that I've seen both fellow It's like
Oh boy.
Yeah.
practically my other last name.
And the Portuguese thing with the LHs and yeah.
It's a lot. It can be a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So the theme of this AHA is I am New Bedford.
Okay.
And basically what that means is you are where you are. You are, or who you are is somewhat formed by where you're from. And then it's there's a storytelling series that they want to do here. Now, are you familiar with Alyssa's work?
No.
She, please tell Karen about your,
Yes.
I guess I can't say it's your latest, but it's the latest one to have come out, because I know you're working on other stuff.
Yeah. So I'm a historical fiction filmmaker.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, and the latest is Sweet Freedom, set in pre-Civil War Underground Railroad, about right here in New Bedford, Polly Johnson, and Frederick Douglass makes an appearance. William Roach Jr., all of the figures of the day, and we even shot some of it at the house, the Johnson House, owned by the Historical Society. And Claudia worked on that one too, and she works on everything that I make. She does an excellent job with the period accurate costuming, and there's so much that goes into that too. So
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Is it finished yet?
it is, yeah.
And-
So our we are actually going to be back in New Bedford for the Whaling Museum March 16th.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I saw something about that coming. That's you?
Yes.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
That was so great. That's you.
I love it. Small world.
Claudia, a real quick question about it. I remember I was on a flight to Portugal, and I can't remember his first name, but he was a famous British fashion designer, McQueen. I can't remember.
Yes, I've heard of him.
Was it Stephen McQueen?
I think so.
Because people would obviously Stephen McQueen, the wee macho actor, of the 50s and 60s.
Alexander McQueen?
Was it
Was
Alexander?
Alexander?
I don't know. Anyway, my mother was a seamstress.
Yes, Alexander McQueen.
It was Alexander.
Yes.
Oh, good for you. And my mother was a costume, a schmata maker. She was in the apparel business for that was her main thing, and she was really, really good at it. And it's just like you see this happen. But when I started to see Alexander McQueen starting to put fabric on the form, it was the first time I thought to myself, "Oh my God, this is so sculptural." I never thought
It's
of
really cool.
clothing as
Yeah.
sculptural,
Yeah.
but it also tells stories.
Yeah.
Right. So, what kinds of stories are told with costume? I mean, other than time, period.
Yeah, of course. A lot can be told through clothing. Even like historically, women would wear certain things to make a statement, whether it be out of protest or anything like that, even as small as makeup. So like red lipstick was like a big thing
During World War II,
during World War II, and that was their protest against Nazis and fascism and all that jazz. So it's like really cool to like see the history of everything. And so like for example with like Alyssa's film, it was based in the 1800s. Polly Johnson was like, what was it, like 1839, 1838, around that time.
Yeah, they arrived in 35. Frederick Douglass, I believe, arrived in 35, I believe, yeah.
So, like we want to tell a story through her clothing as well. So, like, we always ask, like, so me and Deborah Rodericks, she worked with me along with costume design, and she's a wonderful human being that you guys should definitely meet. And, I always go into the nitty gritty of like, there's some people who think that color means a lot. So like colors can signify different things. And Alyssa was like, I really want blues and like certain colors. So like at the end, we have one character where she is just, in darkness a lot. She's really unsure. And like, we try to like show that through her clothing. So like we put like darker colors on her where it's like rustic oranges and like blacks and all that type of stuff, and by the end of like the movie, like she's more in lighter colors, and it's basically, it's like she finally gets the clarity she needs. But also, like, with Polly, we try to, like, she has, like, so many different costumes, and, like, they're so beautiful in different ways, and I honestly, like, love historical clothing because it's just so interesting.
And the Johnsons were quite prosperous.
Yes.
As
So
confectioners.
the thing that was nice was that we got to, like, show that through Polly. So, like, she has, like, this beautiful, like, bright green, like, dress. Then she has, like, another one that kind of reminds you of, like, a cake, but, like, it's, like, really pretty and beautiful, and she ends up wearing that too, and it looks like she has cherries. And we try to, like, just show personality through it too. So, like, it's all about colors. It's all about, like, if this person's rich or poor, we show that through that too as well. So,
And everything, it looks so worn and like worn, you know.
it's, like, not
Yeah.
rugged, but, like,
Yeah.
it's like,
It
it's
doesn't
not
look
like,
like a
not off the rack.
costume.
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't look like it's just,
And
like,
you guys put
brand
a lot
new.
of work into do that too.
Yeah, so, like, we had,
Yeah.
like, a lot of nights of sewing. Like, we were working up until, like, the first day of film.
Now, there's a subconscious aspect to it as well as a conscious. I mean, people are seeing something, they're picking up on it, but don't know they're picking up on it. Like, okay, I've watched Forrest Gump 25 times at least. I don't know what it is about, but and
It's a great movie.
I love that
it is.
movie.
I mean, it's so, I mean, people are like, oh, what do you get? It's fought. Blah, blah. No. There's a lot of profoundness to that. And one of the things I noticed, I think after like maybe the 13th or 14th time was, oh my God, he's standing over Jenny's grave.
Yeah.
And that's when he's saying, I don't know if Mama was right or if Lieutenant Dan was right. And his top button was unbuttoned. It was the first time I had noticed in the
Yeah.
entire thing that his button wasn't buttoned.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, that really, there's a piece of detail. I don't think
Yeah.
that was the continuity person was asleep at the wheel or the car.
No,
or
I
the-
think
or
that
the-
was
or
definitely
the
something
dresser,
that was
you know.
meant to be, of course.
Yeah.
Because, like, the
I love
entire
that.
movie, you see him, and, like, he's, like, all, like, prim and proper with his
And
outfits.
stiff.
And very stiff. Even, like, when he's running and he looks homeless, by the end of the, like, he's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to run back home. Like,
Yeah.
his outfits are still put together. Like, he's not looking dirty or anything like that. So, like, even when he's, like, wearing his button-ups, it's always to the top.
Yeah.
But it's funny how you mentioned that. I need to, like, watch it
Yeah,
again
now
and,
I'm
like,
gonna rewatch
notice
it.
it.
I know it was around her death because I thought that was the only time, and then I saw another part. It's like, oh gosh, that must be the first time because, you know, and you try to pay attention because you I mean, you know, everybody's mesmerized by the feather and so on and so forth. Karen was talking before about storytelling and how important, you know. I asked the question. I think it was just I asked them about the Impossible Project just before they arrived, right? So there's this really great film. It's an award winner, an indie film called The Impossible Project. It was this crazy Belgian who decided he wanted to resurrect Polaroid,
Okay.
and thought, how hard could that be? And then he found out how difficult it was. Like, for example, Polaroid lost the recipe to their film formula. But there were other aspects I don't think he ever thought he would. My friend uses the term the sociability of Polaroids. Polaroids were used for naughty things. Polaroids were used for simple things like if you had got into a car crash, or you just, Max, you probably used a Polaroid, right? Yeah. Take a photograph of the damage because boom, it was instant photography. You know, my as I was telling them before, my dad was one of the first. He bought it in McGee's. They had just got it in, and my father was one of those people. He was the first adapter to things. He saw something, and boom, he knew the value in it right away. But the one thing that hit me in the film was, and I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's just paraphrasing it. There's this one man in the film who says, "So, where are all the love texts that you sent to your wife? Are they wrapped in a ribbon in your attic or something to that extent?" That hit me like, I mean, it's like, you know how with the elevator when it goes and it's going to hit that floor and you've got that weird weightless feeling before it stops.
Yeah.
He was like, oh my God. You know, the fleetingness of things. So the idea of stories. Can you say what you're working on next?
Yeah. I have a feature script that I workshopped at a retreat in France a couple months ago.
Oh,
So
excuse me.
I'm working on more feedback that I got from there. That was great. And then a new story that, of course, Claudia and I have talked a lot about. It's set in World War I time period, and it's a connection between the Azores and the United States, specifically our area. I put in a Fulbright application for that, and I'm a semi-finalist, so we'll see.
Whoa!
And if it goes through, we would go to the Azores for 8 months to write it.
That's
in
tough.
the fall. So I know it's a tough one.
That's fascinating. How
Very
wonderful.
exciting.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
my ex-wife was a fabulous genealogist, and she bumped into another woman that she didn't know she was related to, and vice versa. And there was one of their relatives in common who was not very literate, but he was a prolific writer.
Yeah.
You know, he would say, you know, I went to the store and bought 3 cans of sardines, a loaf of bread, and a pack of cigarettes. I mean, he wrote everything down. And this other woman, I think she was in Swansea or Somerset, had this stash of his stuff. And from the point of view of a man who was drafted into World War I, and he describes the boot camp and the whole 9 yards, and then the ground level view of the Spanish influenza,
Yeah.
of all the guys on his troop ship who are dying. And he's saying that a third of them arrived in France. And I'll never forget that kind of thing. So you're a storyteller in primarily in word on stage, and you both are storytellers in film and film.
Yeah.
Yeah. In any type of way that film
Yeah,
can be.
film.
So the film everybody thinks is sexy, and it's fun, but without a good story, right? You really don't have anything to stand on.
Yeah, exactly. Remember in school, they had really said that, because I think a lot of people who go into film are just so excited about the visuals, which of course that's storytelling too, and everything around the written word. But the way that they had said it was, you know, it's kind of like, it's like the Bible first. You gotta get that right, and then everything that you layer on top of it just makes it that much better and emphasizes it that much more. But you really gotta get the story right first.
Yeah. Has to
It's
be like
your
a nicely
foundation.
cooked lasagna by the end. You need like a good
Has
foundation and flavor for it.
Layers.
Yeah.
Layers.
There's a lot of layers.
yeah. As there was somebody who was mimicking French filmmakers. They were talking about it must have layers, you know, because everything, even making a sandwich, you know, you just can't slap the stuff together.
No.
It has to have layers,
Yes.
you know, as you're biting through that. When I was a young graphic designer, I was actually a painter, but I thought I could make a living as a graphic designer because at least people paid you for that.
Yeah.
And I remember how shocked and horrified and mad I was when I found out words first, pictures. So in those days, we used to call what they referred to as text, copy first, art next. No! Oh, yes. The copywriter's got to write the ad first. And then the artist has
Make it
to create, make those words come to life. So that's an important thing. Stories about you know, New Bedford in general. I mean, you've been around,
Oh, I grew up in New Bedford.
okay?
Yeah.
And you've seen it up and down and all around, right?
Absolutely.
What's your take on where we are now and why or how we got here?
Well, I get very defensive about New Bedford when people refer to it as, you know, in less than flattering terms.
Oh, Pit City, like
yeah.
Harry Carr,
Yeah.
Because, you know, yes, there have been lots of ups and downs, but, you know, I have seen the resurgence of the arts take place through the decades. You know, unfortunately, when Reaganomics came into play, you're too young to remember that, but I mean, everything, just fell apart then. The Zeiterion was just starting to get up and running, and all the funding was pulled away from it. I was on the fundraising committee. We had to raise $100,000 to keep it open. And when I was doing at the small art gallery just around the corner from Freestones, near Brick by Brick, I can't remember what the
Artworks.
Artworks. Thank you, Artworks. I used to do an open mic night there, and we'd have a featured performer, and then we'd have people doing spoken word. It took me many years to build that up, and I remember so many people. I live in Freetown now, and people who grew up in Freetown would say, "Well, I'm not going to New Bedford. Oh no, that's too dangerous." And I would say, "No, you have to. It's in the historical section. You need to come. You need to see what's down there." And luckily, I was able to convince some people to come, and they just couldn't believe it. The richness that is, here. And what is available to people, not just tourists. And people will say, "Well, I've lived here all my life. I've never been to the Whaling Museum." And it kind of blows my mind that people don't take advantage of what we have here. And now, for many, many years, we have the beautiful New Bedford, art gallery. We have Gallery X. We have the resurgence of, the Zeiterion through the years. We have so much to offer here. And I'm not sure how you get that information out there, because I know people have been working at it for a long time, and yet still that feeling of New Bedford being less than. They'll go to Providence to PPAC, which is beautiful. I was there recently, but they have the Zeiterion right in their midst. I mean, granted, it's undergoing renovations right now, but
It's the provincialism as well, because I mean, once upon a time, people go, especially from Fall Riverside, to come here, they would pack a lunch. These kind of weird little quirks. And then, Wareham. Oh my God. Wareham is the same distance as Fall River is, maybe a little bit less. But we have these weird conceptions, these weird things in our heads that, when I told my daughter that I was, I had met my Paula, and I was going to get married, and that Paula was from Detroit. My daughter's like, "Detroit?" I said, "Yeah, we're going to get married." "Why are you going there?" It's like, because the media had painted that place out to be such a horrible place. And I thought it was a very cool place, because the story goes that they could have gotten out of the bankruptcy. They were very, very close to declaring themselves bankrupt. And they had a Bruegel painting, The Wedding, that was worth millions of dollars. And if they had sold that as Sotheby's or Christie's, they could have come out of debt and had some money left over. Yeah. And basically the attitude of the people of Detroit was, hell no. And to me, there's something called the Spirit of Detroit, which is an actual statue, right? The storytelling, I mean, are stories like costumes? Are stories, I mean, there's much more to this, right? It's not all that cut and dry, not all that simple, right?
Well, I think when you're talking about, the story of the city, of New Bedford, it has been enmeshed. The story of New Bedford for so many decades has been the whaling city, which granted it was. And that was, an era that was very important, for us and for the world. But I think we need to shift the narrative on New Bedford now. And it's not just the whaling city. It's not the whaling city anymore, because obviously...
We don't whale, yeah.
Exactly.
We just only have the history of it.
We have which is wonderful, and I think it's really important to preserve that. But there's so much more to be shared about the history that you're doing right now with your wonderful film, The History of New Bedford, that goes back to the Underground Railroad and Frederick Douglass. And a lot of people don't realize that Frederick Douglass lived here. I mean, such an important historical figure. And, you know, they say, too, that the Robert's Rules of Order that everybody uses, that was...
Right in where Steeple Playhouse is today.
That's right.
Yeah.
That started, that was from a priest or a minister from New Bedford.
No, he was actually stationed at Fort Rodman. He was a colonel, I think, lieutenant colonel, and he went to he was one of the deacons or whatever, and you know, here is a religious organization, and it wasn't as bad as the Council of Nicaea, which is a whole other story. 12 people died that day, but they're all arguing and stuff, and he's like, "This is insane. We have to have." You know, it's like Colonel Klink and Hogan. We must have order. You know, that kind of thing.
That's so funny.
It was insane.
I've been filming government meetings since 2016.
That's right,
it was
for
my
Fairhaven,
very first job at Fairhaven Town Hall.
Oh.
And so I've
Crazy.
heard that, you know, what's it called?
Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert's Rules of Order. That's been said many times, and I'm like, don't know what that is.
It's from New Bedford.
And we're from New Bedford, and
And Bill W. Bill Wilson, who was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was stationed at Fort Rodman as well.
Oh, wow.
And spent many a celebratory evening with the Grinnell sisters right on County Street. So, I mean, New Bedford was a place. I remember doing a podcast with Naomi Slip from the Whaling Museum, New Bedford Whaling Museum, and I said, you know, it seems crazy, you know, pride of place and all the other stuff, but it's so many things have come out of New Bedford, and I think she said something to the effect of, and so many things have come into New Bedford. Now, Dave Reese, who's doing our jazz series, said the exact same thing. So many great jazz musicians were born here, formed here, and went out into the world. And then so many great jazz musicians came into the city and made this their city as well.
Yeah.
You know, left their mark, or you know, if they were transiting through. So that I think is an important aspect to talk about. And speaking about talking about, do people talk anymore? You were talking about that family sitting there with the kids with the iPads and the mom on the phone.
Yeah.
The Simpsons have to be probably the best storytellers on television for the past, 30 years now?
Yeah,
Matt Groening and the Simpsons are eerily always ahead of history. It's the weirdest thing. I mean,
they have some fortune teller on their set or something. I don't know what's going on with them.
It's a bizarre
It's
thing.
really
they
bizarre.
Talk about an electoral, how an election is going to end up, and people are like, no, and that's how it happens. You know, and
At that point, it's like, are they manifesting it, or do they actually know what's going to happen? you
Right.
know?
It's
And
a
then,
little scary sometimes.
Yeah, it's creepy.
And then there was this one episode that flashed back, and do you remember TV dinners?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
when they first came out.
Yes, I do.
And so now they all have their TV dinners, and they go, and the only difference is instead of putting them in the oven like we did when we were kids, there were no microwave.
Yeah.
Everybody microwaves their TV dinner, then they run into the living room, and they're just eating and not talking and just watching the
Watching
television.
TV, yeah.
And that's it. There's no interaction with there's no generational interaction. There's no stories being handed down.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's one-dimensional.
I think, Alyssa and I, we have our own generation. And within our friend group, I can't speak for everyone in our generation. We've tried to cut back on our phones as much as possible.
Yeah.
And try to reground ourselves and
it's like a new
appreciate
wave.
what's around us.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of people around us as well, that we know, it's we notice how addictive our phones are, and we're just whoa, we need to put them in our pockets, put them away, and appreciate what's around us, because we're missing so much. We're missing so much beauty, so much so many things that we don't even
Talking to
see or talk.
strangers
Yeah,
Right.
there's so many interactions we miss.
The weird FOMO, the fear of missing out, you're actually missing out. Well, when we had answering machines, one of the first things that people would do before you could do them remotely was you'd come home to see if there was any. It would validate your existence.
That's
I
right.
don't have any, I don't
Validate
have
your
any
existence.
messages, right? And then it was like with pagers, if your pager didn't go off, or emails or text.
Now
or
social
whatever.
media is like the
Oh, it's
validation for our
constant.
existence.
It's constant.
And it like really messes with your mental, you know?
Yeah, I got to. I
'Cause
just
it's like
can't handle it anymore.
just in your hands now. It's not like you spend a whole day outside and then you come back home and you try to see if you have any like messages left or anything like that. Like you just take out your phone. It's like a computer. You just open it in the middle of Starbucks, or you know, when you're gonna go use the bathroom or wherever you want to go. Like, you know, it's so conveniently there. You can see where you're getting your validation and if you're getting it.
So let me put a plug in for Adam Katz, who is the proprietor of Play Arcade.
We love him.
Is that why this place, or one of the reasons why this place has become so popular? Because even though we have the technology of like the early days of of games, pinball and so on and so forth, and video games,
Yeah.
you're not isolated. You're not in your basement. You're not in your room. You're with other people. I mean, the karaoke. I mean, that's like incredible.
I love
Yeah.
it. And then over here we have like board games. So then it's
Board
like
games.
Right.
you're interacting with people still too, which is really nice. It's like
Yeah, we've
there's
met
a lot
new
of interactive
friends,
games.
just-
Yeah, we've
yeah.
met a lot of people here as well. So it's just like it's a nice space away from home where you can appreciate things that we might not have at home as well, because there's so many like vintage games here as well.
Okay, you hit on two things that triggered two thoughts. One of them was Schultz. I can't remember his first name. The founder of Starbucks Coffee,
Yes.
who said that Starbucks was the third place. It wasn't home, it wasn't work, it was the third place.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our nephew in Chicago opened up a cafe gallery. It was one of the first hybrids. Galleries were trying to survive cafes, or really trying to expand, to get more people to come in. And I met a lot of young people who lived there. It was like on Sheridan Road next to Northwestern, and sandwiched between Northwestern and Koreatown. And I got to meet all these wonderful young people, and they were really excited about him opening up this cafe gallery, because they said, we pay this exorbitant amount of rent for the studio apartments, and we don't have living rooms. And I don't know if he's realized this, but this has become our living room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people, they would have poetry readings. They would have, acoustic, electric, every form of entertainment you can think of, games and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So regardless of all of the technology that we have, people still want to gather around the campfire.
Mm-hmm. I honestly think so.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Look at us now.
Yeah, look at us.
That's
I mean, these are conversations that Alyssa and I have all the time. I always complain to her that I feel like Fairhaven needs more spots where young people have places to like hang out at, even during the winter, because like during the winter it's like, what are we gonna do with ourselves? Like, we don't want to stay home. Like, we want to be around each other.
Yeah.
Some of us live with our families, and our families get weird when people come over. You know how it is.
Right.
And
No, there's this weird thing about space. I mean, it's nothing personal.
and it's just like,
And our generation can't afford any.
no, our
apartments or homes.
generation unfortunately can't afford anything. So it's like, we need more activity spaces. And like, I love Play for this, because it's like, there's activities. If you want to drink, you can drink. If you don't want to drink, you don't have to drink. And they also have food, and it's wonderful. And I feel like we need more spaces around here where it's like tea houses. Like, I follow like a lot of places in like New York City. They have tea houses where they do poetry nights.
There's
and
one
play
that
jazz.
it's not
really
a
cool.
traditional English tea room, but it's a Japanese tea
Hanami.
shop.
Yes. I heard
Yeah.
about that, and they're opening, right?
Yeah, it's a new one on
Yeah.
Main Street,
in the old,
Fairhaven.
in the old
Yes.
Bijou
Right.
That's
building, Bijou
awesome.
Theater
Like,
building,
I'm really excited about that.
You're gonna
'cause
love it.
I love tea. And so I'm just like experiencing different cultures too. Like, I love it when like other cultures open things and we can appreciate them and like learn from these people, because they also paved the way of history for people to come here and
Yeah, the
learn
first
more.
Japanese settler in America, right in Fairhaven.
Yeah.
Manjiro.
Yeah.
Manjiro.
Manjiro.
Right. Yeah.
So I
So it's
just
a nice
think it's
callback
really
to
cool.
that,
It's like a
yeah.
wonderful callback, and there's a lot of people who don't know about that. Like I found out, the first Japanese settler was in Fairhaven. I didn't know that until like I talked to Alyssa about it, and she's like, "I love this story," and I'm like, "We should do something.
Oh,
Like,
there's
maybe one day."
Have you been to the museum? They have a lovely
Yeah.
little
I
museum
haven't
in
I haven't been there
Fairhaven,
yet, and I really want to go. And there's just like so much that.
Oh my gosh,
Alyssa,
yeah.
do you have Milton George's "I Didn't Know That" book?
No.
Oh, you've got to get it.
Okay.
Because you will find yourself saying, "I didn't know
didn't
that.
know that."
I didn't know that." And it's,
I love
it's,
stuff like that, though.
You know where the Shepherd Center is now in Fairhaven?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Milton was running a gift shop for the Congregational Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was an old advertising guy. He ran Southeastern Advertising in New Bedford,
Okay.
in the Dartmouth building, which is it's the hotel now, I think, right? Is that
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's where it was.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Jenny, I can't remember his first name. He was the father of the American skyscraper. He was from Fairhaven.
Oh, yes.
Solitaire, which is almost like Solitaire. The guy who invented solitaire was from Fairhaven.
That's
That could go either
I did
way.
not know that. That's
I'm,
like
I'm
insane.
almost. There's so many I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's like so much history around us that like we don't know about. That's like, it feels like it should be obvious that we know about it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Alyssa, do you know, since you're into history of the area, you must know about Hetty Green.
Yes.
I've read many books about her.
Yeah.
But I've never seen a movie done.
Yeah.
And
that would
she
be
was the
great.
first female, with the richest woman in the world
Did
Yeah.
they
at the
make
time.
a movie of the day
Yeah.
they shook the plum tree?
No, but that book, to my knowledge, no. When that book came out, which was for the first book I read about Hetty Green, Salt Marshes was still open at the time, and that's where I bought it. And it got lost in my many, many moves, and there was a very short printing on it. So it's quite valuable. I wish I still had the book. But I've read a few other books about her, too. I would love to see a movie, because you've got Colonel Green at Round Hill. That's her son's place. And he was a very interesting character himself. So I just think that's something you
That
should
would
do.
be great.
That'd be really cool looking,
She was
too.
so cool.
She there was a really interesting aspect to her. She may have been painted out to be worse than what she was.
I've heard that
It's
too.
like Rasputin. There was a book that came out a couple of years ago that said it was the worst PR job ever done on it. I mean, they destroyed this guy. He was totally innocent. And she came from this very strict kind of background. That was also her personality. She was quite... she was a skinflint, to use
Frugal,
that term.
very frugal.
Right?
Yeah.
But there were other things. But then there was Sylvia Ann Holland, her daughter. But she, Black Hawk Robertson was her father. And then she grew up around the Portuguese.
Yeah.
That's she referred to them, and she learned how to economize from them. But there was, there's always something. There's always that background. What drove her to be? I mean, and she could deal any man under the table on Wall Street.
And I really think that's why, her nickname was the Witch of Wall Street, which is just a really horrible way to demonize a woman who just was very astute and
Who bested men.
At
their own
Yeah.
game.
And back then,
Yeah.
women were just not seen as someone who should be in finance at all. And she used to go to work with her father, and she learned the trades, and she was very, very astute and very adept. So I think part of that whole mystique around her is because she was a woman ahead of her time.
Yeah. And it's kind of
absolutely.
like that saying that I've been hearing a lot about, you praise a man for being like really hardworking, but if a woman does the same thing, she's like, just like all the bad words under the sun type deal, because she has a
woman boss is a
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She's doing her job,
it's like,
yeah.
oh, God forbid a woman does the same thing a man does, but the man gets praised and the woman, gets looked down upon and
Right.
talked down upon, and
Right.
she looks like the bad guy.
Yeah.
But it's just like, no, they just have the same drive. We just have the same drive.
It's interesting. There was
Yeah.
a talk at Fairhaven Town Hall, an author who wrote a book on Hetty Green.
Yes,
Yes.
and I wanted to go, and I couldn't make it that
Oh,
night. I
you
was
would've
so
loved
upset.
It. It was so good, and that's where I had learned about her. It was last spring, and something that had stuck with me. I believe it was her father who was in business, and she just really wanted to learn from him and impress him, but he kind of never gave her the time of day, and didn't really trust her with his leaving behind
she
his
was a
own fortune.
girl.
Yes,
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that was part of her story and maybe her motivation.
That,
for the
you're
rest
right.
Of her life.
That's
Yeah.
how what
Yeah.
I've read about her too.
Yeah.
There's the second book I read about her though also talks about some shenanigans with changing wills, which gave her some of her money and her power. Now, that's from one book. I didn't read that in the first book, so it would be interesting to continue to read a little bit more. But of course, it's all colored by history too, and who's writing
Exactly.
who's writing the book.
Exactly.
It's kind of like when you open a
Right.
history
You
book
never
in like a
know.
different country, it could be different compared to like our history books here, because like they want to tell you what they want to
perspective.
tell you from like their own perspectives
it's
and everything like
misogyny,
that.
plain and simple. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
my mom was because of her father, it sounds silly, but I just figured this out a couple of years ago, why she was the way she was. She was daddy's little girl. I only know of him through her, and she was incredibly political. I mean, I tell you, the last election would have killed her if she hadn't have passed before. I
Yeah.
mean, it was brutal. It was brutal. She was that connected to stuff. I mean, I'm growing up as a kid, and she had friends of all different nationalities. And she's talking about the Haitians and the Tonton Macu and Papa Doc and Baby Doc. And, I heard these terms. It wasn't until I got older that I realized what the heck she was talking about.
Yeah.
But women weren't supposed to be involved in those things. They were just supposed to, be in the kitchen and have babies and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's a whole new perspective. But bringing in the human element. So stories can also create false impressions as much as they can uplift and everything else, right?
Oh, absolutely. Who's telling the story? And what is that? There's that old saying. Does the lion ever in this? How come man always wins in the stories against the lion? It's like, well, the lion will win when the lion tells the story.
Yeah.
It's just who is giving the information. So I think. When you look at things like historical, information, you have to always think about, okay, well, where is this information from? Who is giving this information?
Yeah.
I love historical fiction. I'm a big reader of
I'm the
historical
same way,
fiction.
yeah.
So I just finished one book about the Paris apartment, about the Nazis and the resistance, and all that was fascinating.
Oh.
I need to read that.
Yeah, it was really.
I love World War II stuff. I don't know
Yes,
why.
it was very good. You have to read The Nightingale then.
Oh,
The
yes.
Nightingale's amazing. But, I think, our own personal stories too, when you think about it. If you have a brother or a sister that you grew up with and you're reminiscing and you tell a story about, oh, well, I remember when this happened. And 9 times out of 10, they'll go, no, that's not the way it happened. Well,
Yeah.
it's their version. They saw it through their eyes.
Point
My
of
sister
views.
and I go through that all the time. Once in a while, we merge, we go, oh, yeah, that's exactly how it happened. And other times it's like, no, wait a minute. So it just depends on, who's telling the story.
Well, it's true. I had a cousin in Canada who, through us doing our genealogy, her husband was also a genealogist, and we found each other on Ancestry, and there were all these rumors about my father
Yeah.
because they thought they didn't know where he fit. So he was quite a handsome man. And they always thought that he was connected to an aunt and so on and so forth. And it's like, no. And then her mother was the youngest of 5 girls. So the cache of family photographs went from one sister to the next one until the survivor Cecile, which was my grand aunt Cecile, and Marianne, her daughter, said, as we're talking, we're scanning and throwing photographs back and forth across the internet, and she says, it's amazing. She says, this is a particular wedding that you and I were both at. But I never thought about it like this in my life. She said, you were on one side of the room and had one perspective. And look at the photographs that you sent me. And I was on the other side of the room, and I had this, we were both children, but I had this perspective. And wow, isn't that absolutely incredible? Yeah. Being in the same room and seeing things going on in such a different fashion. So we're going to start winding it up. Anything that you want to say? This is one of our podcasts that is kind of timely because it does come out almost immediately next week. So any gigs or any new things coming out, books or?
Well, it's funny you say that because I was thinking of writing a sequel to my first book that I wrote about, teaching oral tradition to students. So I'm thinking about that and starting to work on that because since that came out in 2014, and I've developed a lot more creative elements to help my students since then. So I'm thinking about a sequel to that. I have some workshops coming up to talk about story called Carving Out Your Story, where it's a 90-minute workshop where we help people write a small story from their life that they may want to pass on to family and friends, just orally. Doesn't necessarily have to mean it's something that's published. But it's always interesting because when we give these workshops, I do these workshops with my colleague, Andrea Lovett. She's a teaching artist and storyteller from Abington. And people always say, I haven't thought about that in years. And I've never shared that with anyone. And so we love giving those workshops. We have we have an ongoing series of those. So yeah, that's what's and my intergenerational program, Once Upon a Generation, with my students and seniors, is going to be starting at the end of February.
Have you done anything with our sisters sister school?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Toby, what's Toby's last name?
It begins with an E.
Yeah.
Eugenio?
Eugenio.
Yeah.
Toby Eugenio, yeah. She would be a great person to connect with.
Oh,
because
good.
they're really, really into that. Mm-hmm. And what about you?
Sweet Freedom screening.
I was setting this up as a plug for Claudia, but go ahead.
Sweet Freedom screening March 16. And then, I had something that I forgot. The New Bedford Film Festival, April 10 to the 13th, which is where we're heading next because they're announcing the selections at the Art Museum currently.
Oh,
very
wonderful.
exciting.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Very exciting.
Now, your film on the 16th, that's at the Willie Museum, correct?
Yes, the Willie Museum. And then Claudia and I are part of the team for New Bedford Film Festival, so we'll be
And
We'll be there.
Weekend,
Yeah.
And will that be showing at the film festival too?
No, not this year.
Okay.
No, we started with some festivals across the U.S. and just seeing what comes back, and then we'll have like a nice,
And he's going to be hearing this, but is Ryan Noon's one of his? Is it The Beautiful Life?
Yeah, Beautiful
Yes.
Day.
The Beautiful
Yes,
Day.
Beautiful
Is that?
Yes, that'll be in the
okay.
festival this year, and
Great.
yeah, and Claudia, of course, worked
We
on
both
that as
worked
well.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
the costume and makeup and hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I do makeup and hair. I kind of want to get back into makeup again. I don't know. I'm graduating next week, so.
And as I told you, I
Yeah.
mean, the only other costume artist, costume maker that from my background in theater when I was working for the opera at SMU, is Anne-Marie Kudo.
Anne-Marie, yeah.
And she, I think she's still going,
That's awesome.
She's been doing that for a long, long time. And you kind of said yes.
Yes.
So
yes.
what you are going to be doing that?
Yes,
we'll
I
talk
will
about
be.
it. All right. So Claudia's going to be our podcast host for Lost Artists of Fairhaven.
Which is really exciting. I can't wait to
And what's
uncover all
cool
these
about
people.
it is that she could do an episode all by herself just based on the research that she's done.
Yeah.
Or she can do an episode with just a guest coming in for like a segment of that episode.
Yeah.
Or however the fur flies.
Yeah, of course.
You know?
And when will that be?
She got a year to do 10 of them.
I have a year to do 10 episodes. I graduate next week from esthetician school, so
Congratulations.
I will obviously start putting all of my focus into like researching different artists and stuff, and hopefully we can get an episode out soon. But
Yeah, and those
Fascinating,
those lost
fascinating.
artists are.
It can be any type of art.
It could be any type of art. Yeah. One of the ones I'm really interested in is the women specifically, who
Yeah.
were the lampshade painters
Lampshade
for
painters.
Pearpoint. Those women made Pearpoint a boatload of money, and they were really well. Very talented. If you go into the Whaling Museum, where Alison Wells' painting is that little room behind the main gallery,
Yes.
and you'll see the Pearpoint glass in there. Look at those. I think they're like bisque
Yeah.
lampshades.
They're gorgeous.
They're absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, I went last summer, and I was obsessed with that room. It was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Just like seeing like the different types of arts and the lampshades.
So you've got pretty much free reign to put your own mark on it.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
And we're going to start wrapping it up just in time because
Everyone's starting to play some games.
Adam didn't shut off the skee ball machine. Some nights it's been really, really bad here. So I want once more, Karen Chace, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
And Max, we got maxed out. Oh, you got maxed out.
Oh no.
You can come back.
Yeah, you
take
can
our
definitely
place.
come back
Oh,
if
no,
you'd
he's-
like.
yeah,
You can take our place.
We're waiting for Funny to get Max on board for his unique take on, and actually, almost storytelling, because he has this really unique perspective, this really unique view
Yeah.
of what's going on. You were away from this area for how long?
Well, I lived in Rochester for several years. I lived in New Bedford in the early 80s, but I was in Chicago for a couple of years as well.
Yeah. So I mean, he's got a very unique take.
I'm back in New Bedford now.
Yeah, and he asks good questions as well. So, and then Claudia,
Yes. Hello.
hello,
Um,
and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I will be the host for Lost Artists of Fairhaven. I'm very excited to see what I can uncover, who I can meet. It's gonna range from obviously artists who have passed to artists in the now who probably need like a little stepping stone to
And,
like be seen.
If you go on one of our episodes, I forgot which one of the Richardsons it is, but there was an artist, one of the last names, George Richardson, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But there was this man who said that he was imbued with the spirit. It was really, really kind of an eerie thing. So just because we did one, there's an episode that you can listen to Carrie, the Ezekiel Carey, who is the Millicent Library director.
Yes.
And so he did that, and that's a really cool story.
That's really cool.
And Alyssa,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you
as
so
usual.
much. This was great.
And
Thank you for having us.
For introducing me to
Of
Claudia.
course. I'm so glad it worked out. It seemed like a perfect
really
fit.
excited.
So the
So
network.
this is great. Thank you for having us.
Hold on. Well, folks, that wraps up another live from AHA at Play Arcade. We're in the living room, and thanks so much, y'all, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.